Ok, alors merci à toutes et tous pour votre présence aujourd'hui.
Et en particulier aux représentants d'ONG étrangères qui ont fait le déplacement. Donc on a plus de 60 ONG de 12 pays. On a des pays limitrophes, on a des Belges, des Allemands, des Espagnols, des Suisses, mais on a aussi des pays plus lointains, y compris la Grèce, la Slovaquie, la Suède et même le Canada. Donc merci beaucoup d'être présents et présentes ce soir, et aussi aux journalistes, politiques, collaborateurs et puis personnalités du mouvement qui ont accepté d'être là ce soir. Tout le monde ne connaît pas forcément CAP, Convergence Animaux Politiques, donc je vais présenter rapidement ce qu'on fait. On est une association, loi 1901, qui représente 25 ONG de protection animale auprès des pouvoirs publics, principalement à l'échelon national. Et donc parlementaire et exécutif. Notre travail s'axe autour de différents piliers. Le fait de représenter nos ONG auprès des décideurs, lors de rendez-vous par exemple, d'accompagner les décideurs dans le travail qu'ils veulent bien entreprendre sur la cause animale, de faciliter et de renforcer les liens entre ONG et politiques, et ça passe notamment par des événements qu'on organise régulièrement pour favoriser les rencontres et la sensibilisation des élus. Un travail de conseil et de formation auprès des ONG, et de manière plus générale, on a pour but de renforcer la cohérence de ce qui est porté par les associations auprès des politiques et la cohérence des messages, et donc ça passe aussi par des démarches collectives qu'on initie. En ce qui concerne l'événement qui nous occupe aujourd'hui, donc l'ICAP, International Conference for Animals in Politics, c'est donc la deuxième édition. On avait fait une première édition en 2024, et la volonté d'organiser cet événement, il résultait d'un constat qui était d'une part, alors pour avoir mené un travail universitaire sur les stratégies du mouvement dans différents pays, notamment européens, je m'étais rendu compte que beaucoup, et c'était particulièrement vrai des Français, beaucoup de militants n'étaient pas forcément au courant des stratégies déployées dans d'autres pays, et donc parfois on reproduisait des erreurs dont certains avaient tiré des conséquences, mais en fait, faute que ces informations-là soient bien partagées et déployées, parfois on n'en tirait pas tout à fait les conséquences dans d'autres pays, et à l'inverse, on reproduisait pas forcément des stratégies gagnantes, et on s'est rendu compte que même s'il y a des coalitions internationales sur des sujets spécifiques, il y a des conférences internationales où les militants de tout pays peuvent se rencontrer, mais il manquait un lieu pour les gens dans les ONG qui bossent spécifiquement sur des campagnes à but politique, pas forcément que du lobbying pur, mais des campagnes plus largement à visée politique, de pouvoir échanger sur des retours d'expérience, sur des possibles coopérations, etc. Donc c'est vraiment le but de cet événement. À l'issue de la première édition il y a 2 ans, on avait 90% des participants qui déclaraient se sentir plus connectés aux ONG des autres pays. On avait 75% qui prévoyaient de mettre en œuvre de nouvelles actions suite aux discussions. Et on a refait un sondage 6 mois plus tard, et 6 mois plus tard, 78% des participants déclaraient que les contacts faits à l'ICAP avaient donné lieu à des collaborations concrètes ou, à minima, de l'échange de ressources et d'informations. Donc on s'est dit que il nous a apparu que ça répondait clairement à un vrai besoin, et donc on a décidé de pérenniser cet événement et de l'organiser tous les 2 ans. Donc comme pour la première édition, ce séminaire il est sur 2 jours. Donc il y a la soirée inaugurale ce soir avec un public plus large, comme je l'ai dit, journalistes, politiques, personnalités du mouvement. Et demain, on a une journée de travail, d'ateliers, de conférences et de networking, spécifiquement vraiment pour les gens qui travaillent sur le politique au sein des ONG de tous les pays représentés. Voilà, pour cette soirée inaugurale, on a décidé de l'axer autour d'un débat avec des représentants d'ONG qui travaillent à différents échelons, avec une question qui peut être un peu provocante, mais qui au vu des évolutions récentes nous paraissait pertinente, qui est: faut-il encore compter sur l'Union européenne pour obtenir des avancées pour les animaux? À la fin des interventions, on aura un temps d'échange à peu près jusqu'à 20h30. Et ensuite, on a 1 heure pour profiter du buffet. Et donc, je vous invite à rester, à réseauter et à rencontrer du coup ces représentants d'ONG de tous les pays. Une dernière chose, pensez bien à rendre les écouteurs à la fin. Voilà pour ça. Est-ce que au niveau traduction pour les intervenants, c'est tout bon? Ça marche bien? Ok, super. Super. Donc là, je vais switcher en anglais et aller m'asseoir avec les intervenants. Et donc, encore une fois, si vous avez besoin de traduction, n'oubliez pas que ça se passe de ce côté-là. And also, please think of speaking in the mic for the translation. Okay, so basically, in France, we've been lagging behind in terms of animal protection legislation for a while now, and I think we've been looking to the EU to achieve progress for animals for quite some time. And indeed, many improvements that animals benefit from in France come from the EU. But for a few years now, it's become clear that we can't expect as much anymore. We can cite the reform on farm animal welfare that was promised and that is still waiting. We can cite symbolic backlashes, for example, on the protection of wolves, which is an issue that is quite relevant in France, but also for our neighbors in Italy. And many factors can explain that, and I hope we can dive into it together. So for us, this state of affairs calls for a reflection on where we put our energy and resources. And obviously the question is not to abandon altogether action at the EU level, but maybe how we allocate resources across levels, so be it the national level or the European level or local level even. And of course, probably it depends on the political opportunity structure in each country. So to think about this, we have 5 speakers. So we have Stéphanie Ghislain, who is head of advocacy for Eurogroup for animals. So for us, it was obvious to have Eurogroup in this table because that's the EU is the reason why you exist and working specifically on politics at the EU level. We have Sandra Schoenmakers.
Schoenmakers.
Thank you. So I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your names. So Sandra is the director of Bond for Dieren, which means fur for animals, right? And we thought it was interesting to have someone from the Netherlands because the Netherlands is a country that advanced quite a lot in the last decades on animal protection legislation, and maybe you will have reflections on how the EU is a vector of improvements or can actually make it harder to progress faster than other countries. We have Ruud Tombrock, who is the European Director of Humane World for Animals, which is an international NGO, actually the biggest one for animals, I think. And that was, for us, interesting to have your point of view, because you're working both at the EU level and national level in many countries, including member states, and to see if that's a reflection you had, whether you should reallocate some resources on different levels. We have James West, who is Head of Public Affairs for Compassion in World Farming in the UK. So the interest here is to have someone from Britain who can reflect on Brexit and how it changed the dynamics for animal protection and how it changed maybe your perception of the EU. And also CIWF being also an international organization. Obviously your colleagues still work at EU level, so it's interesting to have your point of view on that. And then we have Naomi Ray, Do I pronounce it right? Yeah. Who is the director from Sentience in Switzerland. And so Switzerland obviously is not in the EU, but being at the core, at the center of Europe, very probably you're largely impacted by what happens at EU level. So we thought it was interesting as well. And also I'm half Swiss, so I wanted a Swiss on the table. May I invite you all to maybe in 30 seconds, just complete what I said on your organization, if you want to present your organization a bit more, very briefly. Should we begin that way?
Sure. Yeah, Bond voor Dieren is founded 40 years ago in the Netherlands when it was very necessary that there was an organization acting against fur, because the Netherlands was, I think, the third country in the world in fur producing countries. Now that's over for the Netherlands, and we're moving towards European level, because that's the next step. Europe should be fur-free, an import ban, a fur farming ban, and so that's what we are at the moment. Next to that, we're doing a lot of education in the Netherlands, because that's still very necessary.
Thank you, Melvin and the CAP team for organizing this event and this discussion. I represent Humane World for Animals. Humane World for Animals is a global organization, international organization with roots in the United States. That's still where our headquarters are. We started to expand maybe 3-4 decades ago internationally, so we have offices all across the globe. And I run the regional office in the EU. We work on basically all animal welfare issues. So we work on farm animal welfare. At the moment we're very busy with fur, with the developments in Brussels. At the moment we work on wildlife, we work on animal testing, we work on companion animals, so the whole portfolio.
I can take this one. Sure. Yes, so Does it work? Yes. My name is Naomi. I'm from Sentience in Switzerland. And we are a small organization, a young organization, I would say. We are a little bit more than 10 years old, and we are focusing on farmed animals mostly, also on trying to approach it from a different angle, also from a consumption angle sometimes, and now again, focusing also on that. And maybe I can say one of our biggest projects that is coming up is a new ballot initiative, because we are, in Switzerland, we have direct democratic tools, and Sentience is focusing on using those democratic tools to achieve better animal welfare laws in Switzerland.
Thank you, and indeed, thank you for having us today. So I'm Steph from Eurogroup, and actually it's Ghislain, but c'est pas grave, I don't mind. No, I'm joking. No, it's true, but it's okay. No, but as you ask everyone, mine is Ghislain. No, but just joking. So Eurogroup for Animals, as you all probably know, is a member-based organization. We have like 105 members all over the EU and beyond, in countries, let's say, in the sphere of influence. I don't like the word, but of the EU, so EEA countries, of course, the UK, and also beyond, because we have international members that have chapters all around the world, which is very useful when you work, for instance, on trade policy. We work on all the usual topics. I won't make you the list. And at Eurogroup, I coordinate the political team, so all the lobbyists of the organization.
Thank you. Hello, I'm James West. And you did get my name right. I'm from Compassion World Farming. We are an organisation dedicated to ending factory farming, so we focus solely on farmed animal welfare. Both animal welfare, but also kind of the broader impacts of factory farming on the environment and so on. I'm based on our UK team, and our UK team is actually relatively new. We only set up the UK team post-Brexit, so maybe that's a Brexit bonus. We've got a headquarters also in the UK and offices here in France and across Europe and elsewhere in the world.
Okay, thank you all. So, as I was saying earlier, the EU has been perceived as kind of the priority level for a while, and also, I mean, quite obviously, because acting at EU level, you can impact a lot more animals, right? Do you think that it was or that it is justified, or do you think that the capacity of the EU to produce change for animals may have been overestimated?
Shall I kick it off? Yeah. No, I do not think it's overestimated. If you look at the past few decades, the EU has made significant animal welfare advancements. Think about the ban on the battery cages. Think about the animal testing, cosmetics ban. Think about the partial ban on the use of sow stalls. Think about regulations on transportation and slaughter. And I would be the last one to say, okay, it's all perfect now, and these things, you know, now all the farm animals, for example, live a happy life. That is not the case, but they were significant improvements that applied not only to the 27 countries in Europe, and until a few years ago, 28. But also it has set the tone at a global level. So we have seen other continents simply copy and paste legislation that the EU adopted. I think in Canada, it was 2023, 2024, that Canada went for a ban on animal testing for cosmetics. So that's 10 years after the EU did it. So Mexico, same year, also a cosmetics animal testing ban. So the EU has frequently set the tone at a global level. So to now say, okay, well, we are having a difficult time, right? So there's no denial justified there. If you look at the EU Commission and how things are going there and how the Parliament is operating, it is tough. It's really tough. But that doesn't mean that if you have a hiccup for a couple of years, that you then should say, okay, well, the EU doesn't make sense. It doesn't help us on animal welfare improvements. That is, I think, a little bit short-minded.
Yeah, of course I would say that, because it's my bread and butter, you know, and that's why you invited me on. But there's also a reason why I work in this organization. And like with Ruud, I really believe that, yeah, we are really in a difficult period at the moment. But I'm not going to repeat what you said, but I would also ask you to consider what's the cost of also not looking at the EU level, because there are, by essence, certain things that you can't do at national level. Like I'm thinking transport of live transport of animals. I'm thinking pet trafficking. I'm thinking anything to do with the trade aspect. So, for instance, you can never ban any imports if you do this at national level. It's not feasible. And that could really also hinder a lot of national progress at the moment, especially when we consider farmed animal. Of course, the first argument of producers is, but why not in the other countries in the EU? Why should we make any progress here? So you always have this consideration, and it's true, it's not so easy. In a very favorable context, like some member states, you can still progress, but for some other, it's really a big blocker, and you will never be able to have this impact. And like Ruud said, you already have this sort of soft power of the EU that can inspire even without any import requirements. But if we get that in the future, which we really hope we could at some point, you even maximize the impact of what you can get at the EU level. And thus, at the moment, yes, it's a hard period. But if we zoom out, of this 2023 failure for farmed animals, as Ruud said, we have done a lot still, even on pets, for instance. The first legislation on pets, maybe an easier topic, but not so easy. I can tell you, when we had to lobby about it, it was difficult in the end. So we still have done a lot. And yeah, I feel like, yeah, we need to still lead by example. And there's one thing also, if you don't look at the EU level, you're also missing the legislation that are not purely on animal welfare, but that impact so much the animals, like the common agricultural policy. You are missing the trade agreements. Some of you know I'm a trade geek, so you miss that too, because that's done at EU level. And then, you know, public procurement, such a huge impact potentially for animals. So you are also going to miss all this legislation that will not really be done. And we'll discuss it later, but all of this is really complementary in many ways.
Yeah, I think I take a similar view, but I would say that the EU hasn't been alone in driving up standards. I think in some cases the EU has followed where member states have led. So, or in some cases member states have led and the EU hasn't followed. So for example, some countries have introduced method of production labelling. Some countries have banned farrowing crates. Some countries have banned enriched cages, or in France have banned the installation of new cages. The EU hasn't yet done any of that. If you go back further, Sweden and the UK banned sow stalls. The EU then followed. So I think the EU does drive up standards, but I think sometimes it's led by member states with kind of an interest in then having a level playing field or the single market operating more smoothly, rather than necessarily any particular passion about animal welfare. I think I'll probably stop there, but I guess what I'm saying is there's, the EU is a global benchmark, but there's definitely a role for action within member states to force the EU along. And I guess if you move into predominantly Eastern European countries, at the risk of stereotyping, some of the advancements there have not been as quick. And I think there you could, that's where the EU really plays a role, because it drives up standards, or even countries that are looking to join, like Ukraine and so on, need to meet that standard. So I think it's a mixed bag.
Can I quickly comment on what James just said? So, of course, member states have led all kinds of initiatives. So the EU is obviously a combination of 27 countries, and every new law will have to go through the council and needs to be approved by the majority of the member states. So it's, of course, member states lead initiatives, and luckily we have a lot of progressive member states that have taken a lot of initiative, and then the EU follows. And sometimes, you're absolutely right, the EU doesn't follow. So I think it's not, I didn't want to create an impression that we think that the EU is a sort of a standalone thing in Brussels that takes all kinds of initiatives. No, of course it's a representation of what's going on in the EU, in the member states.
Yeah, and what I'd like to add, it's really helpful if there's one law for certain things. What we've seen with the fur industry, it was not allowed in the Netherlands anymore, but farmers are moving to Poland or to Spain because there it's still allowed. And if you have a level playing field for all these European countries, that will make a lot of difference for all separate countries that are taking action against animal abuse and have better rules for animal welfare. So I think that's what the EU is really helpful for, can be really helpful for.
I feel like as a Swiss representation, I feel like I have to maybe add that, I mean, of course, I will not say EU should or shouldn't exist. I
don't think that was the topic here.
Of course. No, I just want to add, I think that Switzerland has like, it is also an opportunity that Switzerland is not part of it, because then, I mean, Switzerland likes to pride itself with like being, having the most strict Animal Welfare Act, which is true in some points, but not like all over. And I think we can really have a role in like also playing like with that kind of sense of leadership, or like wanting to be a leader, and then be able to say, okay, if we want to stay leader, then we have to do better and to improve over time. And so, yeah, I would say maybe just I would also add that it's important, like, to look at different, like, kind of issues, and that then to look at different kind of levels and what makes sense for every issue, and like each country can have, like, just different roles in advancing the movement.
Stephanie, you want to add something?
I just wanted to add on Switzerland because I think it's really a super interesting country. And for the people who might not know in the room, you know, it's a sort of common market with the EU. So basically, Switzerland has the right to go higher in terms of welfare. But for instance, at their border, they have to adopt the same standards as the EU. So for instance, at least the colleagues I had in Switzerland working on trade issues, trying to ban certain, you've done that now with fur, and it's an exception that remains for the EU, but for instance, not on cage product and things like this. And for instance, if the EU was to get that, this would apply to Switzerland too, because they would have to respect this. And that could be a benefit, for instance, for Switzerland. If you don't make this at the national level, then maybe if we're bigger, then we can make this for the rest of the world. So, but it's really an interesting case.
I agree.
Okay, so how do you analyze the current slowing down in the pace of progress for animals in Europe? Obviously, there is a question of the rise of the conservatives, the geopolitical crisis. I mean, how do you weigh those factors as a reason for this slowing down?
I think it's contextual, but I think also we were in an amazing period. And when you're in it, you don't really see it. You know, when even in the midst of COVID, the Commission announced that they would review the entire legislation, all of it, we were like, great, amazing. You know, we didn't even think that this was so big that it might get complicated in the end. So the fall is, you know, it's more blatant now that it didn't work. But to be honest, yes, we were also in a very beautiful period before. And now it's really hard. And I think that even before COVID, we can start before COVID, we've been going from crisis to crisis. And we were discussing today about narrative with the Middle East war. And I was like, but in the end, we've always had to have this narrative that animal welfare remains important, even if there is this crisis there, and that even it makes our system more resilient. And I was thinking, it's crisis after crisis, and I don't know, I think many of us have probably PTSD from the summer of 2023, and the crisis of the protest of the farmers coming to trucks in Brussels. I can tell you how many things they've destroyed in my city. We have PTSD of that, and that plus the start of the election really, really killed it. And I think, as Ruud said, it's contextual, and we should zoom out, try to learn of this failure, and try to see as a movement, you know, what are the tactics, what else we can do, and really try to learn from it. But I would say hopefully contextual, and in terms of institution, at least thanks to a big campaign led by many organizations present in the room in Gaia, we got this animal welfare commissioner. At the moment, I won't say anything, but you know, at least it has allowed us to really say you should do something. You have that in your title, and we are still there. While all my environmentalist colleagues are crying and are in sort of, we have to litigate, we have to avoid the regulation, and we are still here hoping for a proposal to regulate something. So, we got that unless we were a strong movement and we had this commission. I don't know, but we're still there. So I hope it's contextual and we get out of it at some point.
Yeah, I think we see this movement going back to traditions, etc., and that's what you see in more and more countries in the EU, and that's what reflects in the European Parliament and the European Commission. So people are thinking more about themselves and how they can, survive the crisis and survive the war, survive, everything that's going on at this moment. And, as usual, animals come on the last position, and they're off the menu. Well, I wish they were off the menu, but in this case, that's not a good thing. But I think that really works for it.
Yeah, and I think that we cannot let this context decide on what we should do or not, because, as you said, animals were never the priority, or not for ethical reasons, if they were at some point. And so it's just, crucial that we keep on going, and that we take care of our movement, that we take care of our activists and everyone, and so we can keep it also on long term, because at the end I think that will make the difference if we can make it longer than our oppositions.
Ruud, you have something to add? How would you weigh the factors? Like, do you think it's more about the power balance between left and right? How do you explain that it's harder now to progress at the EU level?
I definitely think that it's not just something that we see at the EU level. We see it at the member state level as well. If you look at what's going on in the world with all the geopolitical tensions building up almost on a daily basis, and it started with tariff wars, and now it's real wars. Governments are increasingly thinking, okay, but we need to take care of our corporate sector. We need to make sure that we're still competitive. So. Yeah, animal welfare was, even if you look at the EU Commission, the previous EU Commission had Green Deals and farm-to-fork strategies and had sort of a vision. But this commission is all about we need to do what the industry wants us to do, and not introduce any new regulations that may damage our competitive position on the global front. So I think that is. But again, it's not only the EU. It's also, you see it also in member states.
James, what about situation in the UK? Do you feel that it's this trend? Do you feel it the same way, or?
There's certainly a resurgence, or more than, well, not a resurgence, because I'm not sure they were that strong previously, but increasing interest, shall we say, or support for the right, the far right. So we currently have a left of centre government, centre-left government. The previous government was right of centre, the Conservative Party, and I think, to be fair to them, they were the party that banned live exports, for example, for slaughter and fattening, which was a positive. They were also the party that signed a pretty terrible trade agreement with Australia. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying you can get some wins under right-wing systems. But it might be that the wins you can get are different. So, for example, reform that, if the polls are correct, would form the next government, which is Nigel Farage, for those of you who followed Brexit closely. I'm not sure how interested they would be on a ban on cages, for example, but they would probably be very interested in banning non-stun slaughter. Not for the same political reasons, not for any concern about animal welfare necessarily, or maybe it is, maybe it's a combination of the two. But I think it's probably a case of picking your battles to take account of the current political climate.
Okay. And Naomi, you want to add something?
Yeah, it goes in a bit in that direction, like to make, to include animal issues in other issues. Maybe that could be a strategy to talk more about food security or local food procurement, which isn't maybe not exactly where we want to end, but it's a way maybe to go.
And so actually, Stéphanie, you began touching upon that. What do you think, what responsibility do you think the movement bears in the fact that things are progressing less right now? So what do you think is lacking now in the action of the international movement, or what could we do better, basically?
I think it's the million-dollar question. I think we are all asking, since then we have been all wondering about that. I think Animal Society also had a report on this, trying to reflect, what have we done wrong? And it's not super easy. For instance, one could say, I think we were talking about that, about talking more to right-wing politicians. But animal welfare is really a cross-partisan issue. For instance, it's the Tories who really, drove the animal welfare intergroup at the European Parliament for a very long time. It can be cross-partisan completely, but it's true that nowadays the right-wing parties are much more difficult. They turn much more, as we say, to corporate interests. They're more sensitive, they're more porous to those interests. There's jobs, there's issues. And as you say, food security is a big thing as well. So what could we have done better? Seeing this more ahead and even sooner invest in economic arguments. We have started doing this even before the bad summer of 2023, ahead of, I'm not going to get into horrible details on EU lawmaking, but the EU legislation have to pass some kind of impact assessment and so on. So we already invested at that time because we wanted to support, the data and try to, but still we should have had more. We all need to do this much more. So we are trying to do that now, to have much more arguments that are shaped as well to convince, as you said, with other topics, connection with other topics. Every time there's a crisis, we always try to reflect about how can we connect, not in a bad way, but also showing how, by moving on animal welfare, they can actually improve this resilience. And anytime there's a big animal disease as well issue. But what have we done wrong? I don't know. At some point in 2023, we wanted to have, thousands of people on the street to scream at the Berlaymont. We could not do that as a movement. And I think we have to admit that. I remember, not everybody, of course, is in Eurogroup for animals, but I remember our own discussions with my campaigning colleagues being like, we would love to do this, but we, as Eurogroup for Animals, not being a public-facing organization, we can't bring bodies, if I can say. And if you don't have enough people, then you look ridiculous compared to the farmers coming with their truck and destroying and polluting Brussels. You look stupid. So better to be creative and do stunts, but this doesn't lead you anywhere. And we were really blocked at the top level. And yes, what we didn't find is a way to von der Leyen. And we talk about the wolf. It's the same issue with the wolf, to be honest. The power is more personalized and it's more complicated. But yeah, I would say invest more in being able to explain how do we really in practice transition to a higher welfare system, how is it economically valuable, really try to even more show all the benefits that are usually hidden in terms of public health, environmental costs. We have more and more studies about this. There were less back then. And it's always, people always doubt that. And then, yeah, maybe if we could have more bodies, and it's difficult to say that, but maybe, would it change everything? I don't know. But yes, if someone has an answer in the room, I'm very happy to get it.
So if I understand well, you think we lack the capacity to put pressure in the streets, among other things.
Yeah, and maybe as well, but I know the movement is doing more and more, even more, there's, we can discuss it later, but there's a lot of symbiosis in working on corporate outreach, because the more you have companies moving ahead, the more you can justify new legislation. So there is corporate outreach, advocacy. If not, you don't really build on your campaigning, and you have to have some campaigning tactics. And more you have to have diverse techniques and just, synchronize them. Maybe we lack that. We were not really ready for this back then. We had not discussed all this ahead, and not enough. And when we were in the midst of it, it was complicated because everybody was a bit, what are we doing? And I don't know, but would have changed everything if we would have been able to put 1,000 people on the square in front of the Berlaymont? Honestly, I would not bet my salary on this, I don't think so. But yeah, I would say that. And yeah, economic argumentation, much more built, working with even more with farmers who have actually done this transition. I don't know, being even more able to showcase this. Maybe this could have made a change, but maybe not in that context.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought for a long time, that economic proof would help. But, well, I can only talk about fur, of course. We have this report about fur, the socioeconomic case of fur. And it proves that fur industry costs the EU almost 500 million a year. I would think, well, okay, that's the proof. We can stop this business, and that's clear. There are also all these environmental issues. It's really polluting, this fur industry. It's bad for people's health. We've seen COVID, which came obviously from the fur industry. So we thought, okay, this is a clear case. We're still waiting for the Commission and their proposal on the Citizens' Initiative for Fur for Europe. We still don't know what it's going to be, but there is a chance that the Commission will say, well, okay, we only come with better welfare regulation. We don't stop this industry. And I don't really understand how that happens. So yes, I agree, we have to stay with the facts, but it feels like this Commission is working on emotions and on a very, very, very big agricultural lobby.
Yeah, just if I can add, I don't want to talk about this case yet because I still feel we can maybe win it. You know, I'm looking at you because we're still in that fight very, very strongly. Let's see what comes out of this response to the ECI on Fur for Europe. And as you say, I think the lobby meetings I have on fur are the ones where I feel the most, we have all the arguments. How is it even possible that somebody, you know, in the end tells you we will do standards, you know? I don't understand. We will have to untackle afterwards if it happens. But if it happens, I can tell you this is a question of individuals who do not want to see this in the institutions. And then we come back to how do you put public pressure on, because maybe not, you can't do this on the public servants, but on the political level you can. So how can we generate enough public support, enough public pressure, so that for them it becomes a benefit to do this, rather than being able to side with the so small industry costing to the EU indeed, and yeah. And at the moment, that's what we are, I don't know, we are lacking, and fur is really a crazy case.
So to go back to your first question, so what could we as NGOs have done differently or better? And you know, for me, two things come into mind. One is that I think that we assumed too much that public opinions would automatically translate into political action. That assumption has proven wrong, right? So it's not that simple. You organize an ECI or something and you expect the Commission to take action. It doesn't work that way, not anymore, not anymore. So you need more. Like Ghislain said, you need other tactics. If you know that politicians at the moment are listening to industry, then it doesn't make sense to completely ignore industry and just keep on working on public mobilization, which remains to be important, but you need to do more. The second thing that I sometimes think when I look self-critical, right, on our sector, is that our communications is in many situations targeted at people that we actually already have convinced. So we are, and I, you know, if I look, for example, in Brussels, we organize events at the European Parliament and on animal welfare topics, and I look around the table and I see people who are already on our side, and it doesn't say that we should not be organizing those events then, but to also on that perspective widen your scope and try to talk also with your enemies.
I remind you to speak for the translation. Yeah.
We tried to speak with the enemies in Switzerland. We announced the launch of a new ballot initiative, and then the farmers' lobby contacted us and said we should talk. And then we saw this opportunity and were like, okay, they seem to be very scared of this project for reasons that are, it would cost them a lot of money, and I think that they begin to know to understand that people understand that they're with the industry and not with the farmers. But it is very difficult to then find a middle ground because it's always a question of how much are you willing to compromise, how far are you willing to go, and like our issue or our question right now is, okay, how do we find each other when our ask is to change the system, like to the legal framework, And they are completely opposed to any legal change because it forces the farmers, and it's yeah, it just is like a constraint on them. And for them, like the only solution is to work on the demand. So, and if the demand is going up, then the production can follow, and then everything goes around. But then also we cannot like constrain the market, because that would also not be okay. So right now we are a bit at the point where we really ask to you, to everyone, like, okay, where could that middle ground be? Because we are finding it really difficult to find, and maybe the answer will be pressure. But yeah, right now we are still trying with dialogue.
I think you're super right in the sense, Ruud, in the event where we're preaching to the choir. I'm so agreeing with you. On panels, we should always have people that we have different opinions of, so that at least it brings another audience, and at least we have some debate. It's much nicer. Talking to the industry is definitely also something that we need to do. And as Eurogroup, you know, like we are not doing corporate outreach, but in Brussels you have a lot of representation of those producers, and so we have we are talking to them all the time, and I can tell you it's very hard to fix what you can do, what you cannot do. Also, us, we're member based, so we have to take into account the sensitivities of all our members in that kind of work. But for instance, there has been, you know, the Commission at some point launched this very long strategic dialogue on and Philippe, Compassion's president, was a representative. He's also the president of Eurogroup at the moment. Was a representative on this dialogue, and I can tell you it was very harsh. And we managed in the end to get agreement of these also like difficult producers like Copa-Cogeca to having a ban on cages. But this took a lot of work, and in the end, this section on animal welfare was written by us and Copa-Cogeca, because then the rest could agree with it, basically. If we didn't agree, it wouldn't have worked. But you need to invest in that kind of thing, because at the moment, at least in Brussels, it's very sad to say, but if you don't have the industry with you, at least on the need for a change, you won't get anything. Then I think we can fight about the space that we give to the pigs and so on. But if you don't have them with you in being okay with having a ban, this is the problem with fur as well, then at the moment, nothing moves. So it's super important to talk with the industry, but definitely something extremely difficult. And to divide the block, because they're all very different. It's not just one monolith. You have very also innovative and more open producers. So.
Well, just very quickly, I think there's a kind of following on from the industry and the economic argument, which I completely agree with. I think, you know, we have historically said, you know, 80% of people agree with this, therefore government should do it. Doesn't necessarily translate when people get to the supermarket and see the price of products. You know, we all lobby politically, so I don't want to kind of talk us out of a job, but I think there is a role for corporate engagement. And yeah, if you look at the UK, for example, we've just published, or just closed actually, a consultation on banning cages for laying hens. The UK government has. And the UK is now 84–85% cage-free for laying hens. We hope there will be one on farrowing crates at some point, but we don't know when. It probably won't be for a year or more. The UK is only at 50% crate-free. So I think if you reach that tipping point where you can say that most of industry is already doing this, most of the retailers are selling it, it's economically viable, that is a persuasive argument rather than here's one poll of thousands that says what we want it to say.
Please keep the micro, because I have a question specifically for you. Has Brexit changed your perspective on the EU, on work at national or EU level? Did Brexit produce what you in terms of how it impacted animal advocacy? Was it what you expected, or were you surprised by how things went?
I would answer professionally, because my views may... yeah, I'll answer professionally. So I mentioned that Compassion didn't used to have a UK team, but all of our UK work was done from our headquarters. When the UK left the EU, it was decided that we should have a UK team, and our director of campaigns at the time said, you know, you're going to be our policy person, and she said, think of yourself as Mr. Brexit. You know, so, and her her guidance was basically Brexit should ideally result in animal welfare standards in the UK improving. As a minimum, they should stay the same, and under no circumstances should they get worse, should they regress. And I think the reality is it's been a bit of a, some of that we've achieved, some of it we haven't. So I mentioned earlier, the UK has banned live exports for slaughter and fattening. We used to write to the UK government all the time, urging them to do it when we were in the EU, and the answer would come back, we can't blame the EU, essentially. We've also got a new system of farm support scheme where we've moved away from the common agricultural policy, and so farmers are now rewarded for what's called public money for public goods, so improving soil health or biodiversity or animal welfare is one of the criteria, rather than the kind of land-based CAP system that you have in the EU. And as I mentioned, we've just recently consulted on banning cages for laying hens, which I suspect is something the EU will do, but we've got there a bit more quickly. And the UK government's published an 80 policy animal welfare strategy, not just on farmed animals, across the board. It's got some great stuff in there. Whether any of it comes to pass, we shall see. It's one thing writing the strategy, it's another thing actually delivering it. In terms of the negatives, I mentioned earlier, the UK government struck a trade agreement, the last UK government, to be fair, struck a trade agreement with Australia, which essentially lets in lots of beef and sheep meat that could be produced to standards lower than the UK. Whereas when you look at the EU, who just signed an agreement with Australia, okay, it still lets some of it in, but there's some guardrails in place. Well, it's still better than what the quotas are lower. Your quotas are lower for a whole 27 compared to our quota for one. Then moving slightly further afield, we've also, our rivers and seas are a disgrace, because we've moved out of the EU Water Directive. Some of that's due to agriculture, some of it's due to human sewage, essentially, but there is a real issue, and it was a big issue in the last election campaign. What else? Just on trade, I should be fair to the current government. They've signed agreements with America and India, and neither of those have resulted in increased access. Well, no hormone beef. There's increased access for US beef. We don't know what the standard will be, but within the India agreement, there's no change. And in the US agreement, it's only beef. It's not chicken, pork, or some of the really low standard stuff that happens in America that's coming in. So I think, having said all that, we are in the process of, with the EU, agreeing a SPS agreement, and that will potentially constrain what the UK can do. Well, it won't constrain what the UK can do. It will politically. Basically, the UK could choose to implement a policy, but as things stand, it won't be able to stop those products coming in from the EU. So going back to farrowing crates, for example, in the animal welfare strategy, there's a proposed ban on farrowing crates. If the UK bans farrowing crates and the EU doesn't, because of the SPS agreement, pork products from EU will be allowed in, even if they were in farrowing crates. So it risks having this kind of chilling effect, where essentially the UK might go further but doesn't want to be undercut. So that negotiation is still going on. We'll see where that gets to. I guess the long and short of it is that there have been some wins. There have been some losses, would be a bit strong, but certainly some less positive things. And is it what we expected? I think so, more or less. I think some of the promises of Brexit were maybe over-promised. And I was chatting to Ruud beforehand, and he was saying it was useful having the UK in the EU because we were one of the more progressive countries that would try and advance things. Yeah, I miss you. I can't, no longer being professional. But one day. But don't quote me on that. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if that answers your question really, but I think there have been, I think where we could expect to see wins, we have got them. So on live exports, for example, on everything else, I'm not sure that we will get much further than the EU does much more quickly.
Okay, thank you. And Naomi, so what's your perspective on the EU? What's happening in the EU? How does it impact your work in Switzerland?
Yeah, of course it does impact, especially what you were saying about trade and imports and everything. Maybe I would say that the most use that we see right now and that we can use the EU for, and the progress that is made in the EU, is to put pressure on Switzerland, as I was saying before. If we want to keep our status and our pride about being the most, like the strictest or the best in animal welfare issues, we have to keep up with what is going on. We have to look at what is going on elsewhere with our neighbors. And for example, Sentience is working on ECC, on European chicken commitments, because in Switzerland we don't have any for retailers right now. We have been working on putting pressure on the retailers, and what has been interesting, or what seems to be kind of working, is when we have examples like little Germany or little France that has done commitments, and to then be able to say, little Switzerland, where are you? How can it be possible that Switzerland is lagging behind? And we see that triggers a lot retailers, which is great for us. And it's also like something that creates like an outrage amongst consumers, because we are told constantly that we have nothing to be sad of in Switzerland, and our animals are all outside and doing great. And then when we can show, no, firstly it's not true, but secondly, other retailers in other countries are doing better. We see that seems to be something that puts pressure, and that we will continue to work on and see how far we can get there. But I would definitely say that there is some potential in that case.
Sandra, so as I said, in the Netherlands, you progressed faster than many other countries, right? And not only on fur, but on circuses, on experimentation, on many animal issues. Relating to what James was saying earlier, like, do you feel that sometimes the fact that the EU is not progressing as fast may make it harder for you to argue going further on animal welfare on some issues, or do you feel that all in all the EU is helps you making progress in the Netherlands, and not only you, Bond for Dieren, but I mean the Dutch movement in general? I mean,
well, for quite a long time, the Netherlands was very progressive on the field of animal welfare. Like, much regulations, better animal welfare than in other countries. But I have the feeling that it stopped, and not due to the EU, but due to the change in politics. Well, there are, as we see in every country or in many countries in the EU, it's turning towards tradition again, and farmers want to stay farmers, and they want to make money. They keep arguing that they're in the Netherlands, that they're making a lot of money, that they're feeding the whole world, and that we have the best animal welfare rules there are. So we should continue with this business. So that's really changing. What did help over 20 years ago was the foundation of the Party for the Animals. I think they had a big role in politics. They mentioned a lot of welfare issues. They helped a lot with making new legislation in animal welfare, and we see a lot of countries have followed this example to get the animal welfare into politics. But well, like we discussed before, sort of stopped, I think, or it's not going as fast as it used to be.
For how long would you say? Is it basically the same as everywhere else almost everywhere else in Europe, or has it been like for the last 4 years?
I think in the Netherlands they're still working on better animal welfare, and a lot of people are really convinced that they should do it. But then there's the question, what is animal welfare? And there's a lot of difference in how people participate it. Because I talk with a lot of people, also people who are really working in these animal businesses. And I think they're really honest when they say, well, I'm good for my animals. I'm doing this and this and this. And then I look into this farmhouse and I think, well, not my opinion of having welfare for animals, but people are trying to do their best. And I think it's still better than in a lot of other countries. I'm not sure if it's the best animal welfare in the Netherlands, but Switzerland is working on it. So I don't know. So yeah, it has been, but for now, I'm not sure.
Okay. And Ruud, so do you, how do you approach the question of the levels of action? How do you decide, for example, how much effort you put in some countries on the action on national level in some countries, or has it changed in recent years? Have you considered allocating more resources to action nationally in some countries, or the focus you put on European level or on national level, how has it evolved, or did it evolve at all?
Yeah. In order to answer that question, maybe 2 sentences on how we work. So most of the campaigns that we run in the European Union are, the eventual goal is to achieve something at the EU level, because of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. 27 countries all at once, plus norm setting at the global level. Now, what we do is when we start to work on a particular issue, we look at the political situation, obviously at the EU level, but also at the member state level, because again, Brussels will not move without the support from the member states. So, and on each issue, the selection of member states that have a lot at stake, that can influence that decision, it varies. So, for example, on wildlife, that's a different mix of countries if you compare that to, for example, farm animal issues. So we select the member states that we think are most strategic, 4, 5, 6 member states usually, and then we develop what we call an integrated campaign, where we combine things, doing things in Brussels and at the country level. Now, I'm not sure if we changed the balance over the past couple of years. I think we're very pragmatic in our approach. So every time we look at where the highest leverage is. So is that in a country, or is that or is that in Brussels? And in order to do that, to define that level of opportunity that you have, we look at the political situation, we look at where the government stands, we look at the political parties, we also look at the industry, we look at the public and attitudes, and then it's not like a science, like maths, like you score everything and then the end score is. If 10 people do it, then you'll probably get 10 slightly different outcomes, but it does say something. It says something about the level of opportunity that you have. And then sometimes we're wrong. So we for example, we launched a campaign about 6 years ago, where we thought that the EU Commission would be open to a legislative proposal on that particular issue. But we were wrong, because 1 year before the elections, the Commission started to backtrack and say no upsetting of whoever. So we're not going to do it, and with this Commission, it's not going to work. So then we say, okay, well, then it doesn't make much sense to continue our activities at the EU level. We were going to reduce the resources that we put into it, and then maybe we can do something more at the member state level. Does that answer your question?
Sure. Yes, it does. Thank you.
And may I quickly say something to Sandra? Because
Sure.
today, when I walked here to this venue, there's on the news that the Dutch government has announced that they're going to introduce stricter transport regulations, and they're going to decrease the maximum temperature from 35 to 30 degrees and some other stuff. So it's not all hopeless. That's all right.
And lastly, so Stephanie, how do you see the future? For action for animals at EU level, on the short term, on the less near term?
How do you see the future? I think that at least when I look at the eagerness of our members to work on EU-related issues, I think there's a lot. It increased a lot since I've started working at Eurogroup. I can't really say that it was low before, it was not, but I really saw a big increase. And that's also due to, I would say, the opportunities. The revision of the animal welfare legislation really created ground for us to really work together and to do more. As Eurogroup, I would say that definitely we changed a bit in the recent year. You know, we tried different things. So for instance, for 3 years, we tried to have more coordination of our members in certain countries, and it really worked out well. Now we felt, okay, we can see that there's more and more individual lobbying needed. You really need those connections now. It's even more, as you say, the argument of the economics or of health issues. A lot of arguments that for you make so much sense to just not trickle down. So you also need very much this Brussels presence. But for me, when I read a bit the top, I was like, for me, it's not an either or. It's not possible. As Ruud said, like the EU does not take decision in a vacuum. Yes, you need to be in Brussels, you need to influence, you need to strategize. But if you don't have your member states, nothing happens. Even MEPs who are in Brussels, they're much more eager to follow what a local organization is saying. So also as soon as we could, when we got more funding also from external funders, we were re-granting a lot to members to get them to have also more opportunities to work. And for instance, recently, I'm amazed by what some of them have been able to achieve. I don't know if some of you followed the elections in Denmark, for instance, with the pig welfare issue being so high on the agenda. Every day, my colleague from Denmark was sending me news, and it was my boost of the day. It was wonderful. And then also, slightly different, but even in Hungary, we might laugh a bit, but TISA one, still conservative, but gosh, on their platform, there is something on animal welfare. It's not all we want, but there's mention of positive lists, there is a mention of working on circus, there is a mention of at least cages for laying hens, and this is also thanks to the work of the members that are there. We work with them. We are so happy that they got there because they didn't believe they could do anything at that moment. So I think the future is, for me, it's not dead yet. We have to survive this term. I don't know what's going to be next, but I feel like this moment at least makes us refocus and think about how also to work together better. I can see a difference, for instance, at Eurogroup, we were already working a lot with members, but now from the lobbying perspective, we do it even more. We really try to be in constant touch with them, to really work together, because there is no EU issue. There is some, but even the CAP, which is decided at EU level, you have national plans. You have to work with your members. Meat chicken, great. If they work on it at national level, as we say, they create either corporate-wise or they create grounds for us to say this can work, like what happened in the Netherlands. So we can build on that. So technically for us, this is an EU topic. So you just really need to be creating, we always like this word, a virtuous circle, but it's so true. You have to create this in order to be yeah, and this has led us to do that much more. So I don't know if the future is going to be bright or not. On fur, I still have hope, and we will fight like hell. On farm animals, I think at least we will get something. I think they have to. What we're going to get, let's see. I think the possibilities have narrowed down. But then can we build upon this? Can we go through this term and then get more to the next? Possibly. But I feel that in any case, we cannot not influence it. At the moment, it's impossible to let go, or it will be turned against us in a way.
Okay, so we're running out of time. So maybe do you have any takeaway message for the people here? Be it in terms of I don't know, like what kind of issues you think we can still progress on. So you mentioned fur. Be it on the what activists, what NGOs should do. You all spoke a lot about corporate outreach. Is that the right word? I don't know. Like, yeah. Do you have any takeaway message for?
Yeah. So I think, from Compassion's point of view, if there's one issue I'd urge people to keep pushing on, it would be cages and the cage age. Like Steph said, I think where we get to, both in the UK and EU, is still undecided, but there will be progress of some form. I think citizens need to kind of make noise. We kind of talked. I didn't want to hope I didn't sound too dismissive of polls and opinion earlier. Ultimately, the people in charge have to be elected, so they do have to care what their government, what their populations are saying. So, and if politicians aren't hearing it from members of the public, then they're not hearing it. I mean, they're hearing it from us, but we can reinforce what the public is saying. So citizens' voices are key, and then consumers, vote with your wallet as well as at the ballot box. Buy the right things, don't buy the wrong things. Sort of support good practice where you can. I think that's what I'd say. But I think we're so close on some things. We just got to keep pushing.
On what maybe we could do all better, but it's of course, something also I really truly believe in. It's even more collaborate together, being even more transparent, collaborative, and really build on our differences. Because every organization is very different. We have different tactics, different ways of doing. But in my brain, there is so many ways to use that at our advantage. There's so many, and by really be all together, it's much more efficient. So this is something definitely we could do better for the citizens. And the difficulty for them, I feel it's like, people complain. Nowadays, we're more in the digital age. We feel like we just signed something, it works very well. And people need also to understand that their voting behavior matter. And if they have to also get the ones they elect to be accountable at some point if they truly feel something is important. And that I still haven't also have an answer. How do we manage to turn this support for animals into voting behavior? We had a poll recently on live transport, and one of the questions was if your politician was doing, voting this horrible, this proposal which is horrible in Parliament, what would you do? And I think it was a good number that said, I would not vote for them anymore. But how does that translate in reality? Not so much, because in the end we know that that's not the top issue that voters are caring for. And I don't know how we can change that. I don't have an answer, but it is really something that is probably very, very important too.
Yeah, I think I join what you both said. It's we have to continue to make animal welfare an unavoidable political issue, despite of other very important issues that coexist. But we have to make sure that animal issues have a space and have still a space. And I think for us it's also through dialogue, through understanding each other, and trying to build on common ground as much as we can.
Yeah, Melvin, let me answer your question by expressing a hope that I have and a big sort of dilemma question. So the hope is that it would be so great to have a clear, time-bound EU legislative roadmap to phase out of the most extreme forms of confinement of farm animals. So it's an illusion to now keep on thinking that we're going to phase out of all cages and crates within a couple of years. That's not going to happen. But the worst forms of confinement, if we can get a clear, again, time-bound roadmap, would be amazing. Now the question or dilemma that I have is actually, you know, it's about the gap that we see between consumers and citizens. So they're the same person during the day signs petitions on animal welfare and in opinion polls. They say, yeah, but the government should do more to protect farm animals, etc. Yes, we see that and we appreciate that. But then that same person in the evening in the supermarket, they buy the cheapest possible piece of meat where they know that welfare conditions can't have been really great. So to close that gap, because this is being held against us by the industry. They say, okay, well, you NGOs, you have your opinion polls, 85% plus, etc., but we look at sales. We look at what people buy in the supermarkets, and we are and that's a different thing. And we are worried that if we're going to, etc., introduce higher standards, etc., that it will be, yeah, a problem. If anyone has the answer, how to close that gap, I would really appreciate hearing about it.
So that may be something for the discussions tomorrow, actually.
Okay, everything's almost said, I think. Well, but I'd like to say let's stay positive. I mean, it's a hard time, but let's stay positive and let's be happy with every small step that's been made and that's going to be made. Keep your opponents close. Try to get into them, under their skin, to know what they're driving, what are they thinking, how can we influence them? I still don't know it, and that's another, well, interesting question to think about. But stay positive. That's what I'd like to say.
Okay, thank you all. Maybe we can applaud them and then. Then we can have 20-25 minutes of questions. So my micro distributor is not here. So.
Well, thank you very much for this very interesting discussion, and thank you for coming to France. Just to present myself, I am Isabelle Marais. I am in charge of bullfighting here in Paris. I try to fight this terrible habit. And I wanted to comment on what you say, Ruud. What would be the answer? I think we have the power as consumer and also to grow awareness of our colleagues, of our families, regarding what's terrible in the way we are behaving with animals. So for me, we have the power with two cards. We have a credit card and we have a vote card. So in my opinion, this is really what we need to be working on, this awareness of our family, friends, and also with the population around us. So not really a question, but more a comment.
Thank you very much.
Can I just react to the
Sure.
to the topic? Of course, I agree that consumer behavior is crucial. I just would want to add a little thought on not putting the responsibility on individuals, because we know that the information is not lacking. If lack of information would be the problem, I don't think that we would be at the same in this room talking about these issues. I see the problem more in getting retailers and the industry to acknowledge that they influence the consumer's choice. Because the problem is not that there isn't an influence, the problem is that the influence is a wrong one. And so I have the hope that if we can put more, I don't know, clarity or more transparency about how consumers' choice is actually already being influenced, maybe we can, also work with that to show that there's nothing neutral about it and there's nothing natural about consumers' behavior as it is right now.
If you're interested in this, you can read. At Eurogroup, we also work on food policy, and we made a report with the consumer organization and the environment in Brussels, BEUC and AEB. The coalition is called Put Change on the Menu, and it's really on a word that is horrible from Brussels, like food environment, but it's to explain exactly that. The promotion, the 1+2 for free, and so on, and the way they display the products also play a huge role in what people are. And I always hate it when they tell me that in lobby meetings, because can you really ask a parent of 2 kids who goes at 6 p.m. in the supermarket where there's almost nothing available to be blamed for what he's buying? I really feel this is the worst excuse ever. But so food environment is a terrible word, but a very interesting concept as well.
Hello, my name is Andreas Manz. Thank you very much for this fantastic discussion. I would like to challenge the narrative. We heard multiple times that things are getting so much worse because the things were never easy. Just give you one example, animal transport. 2008 till 2012, there was an 8-hour campaign. Then we had an animal health check, and then we had a parliamentarian, which was later animal welfare commissioner, and then we had the Stop the Trucks campaign where we worked a lot. And then we had this special committee in the parliament which showed the problems we had. And now it took, then if we calculate, 24 years that we now discuss the things. And of course, it's super tricky. And of course, the tasks are new. But I would like us to not say, oh my God, things are grim. I would like us to change and adapt and be stronger and go forward and show how strong animal welfare are. But we need to ask a question, do you agree with this assessment?
I will allow myself, I completely agree. When I joined Eurogroup, the best we had to care for was a strategy or roadmap on animal welfare. And that's also why I said I feel that we feel so bad because of the beautiful period we had at a certain point. But I really, for instance, I started at Eurogroup on trade, and I worked on trade agreements because there was no way the EU could consider imposing similar standards on the products that are importing. No way. It was a closed door, every door. And this changed entirely in the period. And now, we could have that. So I'm with you. I think we are just suffering from the beautiful moment we had in the previous term.
Well, thank you very much for this talk. My name is Astrid. I'm a dietitian, like plant-based dietitian, and I've worked in advocacy for 4 years now. I condone what my neighbor said, that there are some good things happening. For example, in Amsterdam, there was a ban on meat ads, and that's wonderful. Another example is Denmark, where there are some real plant-based or at least plant-forward policies, or also about companion animals. Some countries are really working on the matter, and they are forbidding some races, like, the ones with hypertypes, that have the nose really, it's very bad for their health. My question would be, you touched base a little bit about it, but I'd like you maybe to go a little bit more on the subject. In your opinion, how could we make these countries or these places or these initiatives, how can we build them as role models? How can we bring them, show that it is good to do this, and so that other member states or the EU sees that it's a good thing and that we should go this way?
No, you're so right. And to be honest, that's what we try to do. Because, for instance, you have countries, as you said, in Denmark. My colleagues in Denmark would tell you it's terrible. We still have so much to do. But for us, it's a champion at the EU level. So exactly as you say, when they get to all the reins, for instance, they had the presidency of the Council of the EU, but definitely collaborate super strongly with them. And we try to get them to also showcase what they are doing. But very often other countries might be more reluctant, saying realities are not the same, etc., etc. But yes, definitely this is something we could try to do. Like, for instance, on meat chicken, which we know will not really be in the first proposal, and it's really, really hard to, admit that. But yeah, there are so many things happening in the Netherlands, in Norway as well. And this is part of having those case studies that shows that it's feasible in practice. But it's, apart from, I think also member states that are more progressive are getting a bit fed up. Because, they're asking for more. Some of the time they're telling us, but we've been asking now 3 times, we never get any answer. So they also feel offended in some ways. Huh? So we need also to nurture them so they continue to champion the issue. And sometimes there is a change in government, and in certain countries, a change in government won't change their position because the public support is so strong, like in the Nordic countries. But maybe the minister won't have the heart for it. And maybe with the new government, the minister really will have the heart for it. But in some other countries, a change in government will change everything. Like in Slovenia, there have been amazing progress recently. And if the former prime minister doesn't manage now to make a coalition, very tight election recently as well, it will be the other side, and the other side will be terrible probably on animal welfare. So that can change a lot. So you need really to take the pulse and see and use every transition you need to. But apart from that, often you have realities of it's not the same. We're not in the same country. We are more of a producer. We are exporting. Oh yeah, they did this for local production, but not for the export. But yeah, it's definitely one way to try to push for change.
Yeah, I'd like to add. Well, in the Netherlands example you mentioned, there are a lot of animal welfare organizations. A lot. I can't count them. So many, and they have a lot of influence on the politicians. And in the bigger cities, there are quite progressive municipality councils, etc. So that helps. But on the other hand, you see that retailers, etc., are taking back the progressive actions they had. Like they had goals of selling 10% less meat or no ads for 2 for the price of 1. But the consumers are laying back now. They want to pay anymore. So you see retailers are cutting back their promises. They promised not to advertise with meat, and they are starting again doing it. So there is this flow. Some things go very well, and other things are, a bit harder.
Hello, my name is Clément Hardy. I'll be representing my colleagues from Canada. Thank you very much. It was an amazing talk, and I think it gave me a bit more hope towards the EU that I had before, so I thank you for that. Now, the question I would like to ask is that in France, there is this saying that what's going on in the US, whether it's in rock and roll or politics, often ends up in France a couple of years afterwards. And there is something quite remarkable happening in the US right now, activism-wise. In a couple of weeks, I think there is 2,000 activists who are going to go and rescue dogs in a dog breeding facility in the US. It's been very publicized, and strangely, they have had an enormous amount of public goodwill, even from a lot of very public figures. And it's doubly remarkable because they're doing that in the Trump environment. And so my question to you would be maybe a little simulation. This open rescue movement, so the principle from what I understand is to investigate a particularly horrible farm or breeding facility, document what happens, give it to the authorities do nothing, document that they do nothing, and then you say we are going to come and we are going to rescue animals. And so it gives a lot of individuality to the animals that you rescue, and strangely, in a kind of civil rights ways, it gives a lot of positive feedbacks from the public that don't see it as an intrusion, a crime, but rather an act of saving, a non-violent act. Now, a lot of activists in Canada has been following what's happening in the US. It's been published in the New York Times, in many things, and are asking themselves, is it going to come to Canada? Should we do it in Canada? And I'm wondering that maybe people in Europe are asking that too. Now, connecting to the fact that you said we have trouble mobilizing people in the streets to put pressure, I was wondering, as a kind of simulation, let's imagine that this movement ends up coming to Europe. What would you think would be the effect on the politics of the EU? Would it be a good kind of pressure, especially if there's not violence and if the public reacts well to it? Or maybe would it be something that could be kind of chaotic to what's going on as efforts right now?
Actually, if I may just butt in, I don't know if you heard about Green Hill, the Italian campaign in the 2010s. So basically, I think that was in 2013. It was a pressure campaign to close down a facility breeding dogs for experimentation. And at some point, so there was a momentum building, and more people were demonstrating. At some point, there was a naturally occurring, let's say, for people entered the facility and stole dogs, basically. But as you said, it was like an improvised open rescue, and that movement was actually super popular. So they were all going on TV like heroes, and it ended up with big organizations supporting and getting traction to that campaign. It ended up with Italy passing an important law on animal experimentation. So what you said is actually already happened, and with quite some success actually. But I will let you maybe react.
I can't speak to dogs because it's not something I work on. I mean, I think it's really interesting. We do or have previously done investigations, and we have exactly that problem that, you know, the industry then say, oh, well, you just got lucky and went to 5 bad farms. You know, well, no, it's, you know, this is normal, but, you know, we can't go to every farm. We've never really thought about, you know, what we do next. You know, we just do another investigation at some point and it goes round in circles. I guess what I can't get past, and I don't want this to sound dismissive, is I guess for farm animals it's difficult because, you know, if there's 40,000 chickens in a barn, you know, who's going to take a thousand? You know, if you've got 2,000 people, they've got to take, what, 500 chickens each or something. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't aware of it. I do think it's an interesting idea. Thanks.
Yeah, like James, I was wondering about sanctuaries and so on, if you had bigger animals and so on. I don't know. I think also public, and it's bad, see it differently when it comes, you know, when it's about pets, for instance, or even pets used for experimentations rather than farm animals. I know that we don't, as Eurogroup, we don't do this. So we don't have the situation, we don't do investigations and so on. But I know plenty of our members are sometimes taking to court, and there are many legislation. I think even in Canada at some point there was a gag act, no? Like preventing people from coming on exploitation and taking pictures. No? Wasn't there discussion about that? Because I remember some colleagues telling me it was really dangerous. But so I know, I can't speak for that, I know L214 in France is always constantly being prompted, like in court and so on, for what they're doing, and they do an essential job. We need those pictures. But now, I don't know how people would take if people, you know, were going to a pig farm and save the pigs. I don't think people would be unhappy. But I can tell you that in some countries, politicians would be probably using this to even more criminalize a bit us, like the right that, for instance, if we were to take trucks and go to Brussels and do what they do, we would not enter the building anymore. That is for sure. They allow them to do much more than what we are allowed to do before we lose credibility, before we lose anything. So I don't know, maybe if we play tactics and some were doing this and we could, take the pulse on what's the impact, why not? But I could imagine as well that in some countries where the farmers are really strong, like maybe in France, some French here can maybe talk about this, there would be like, oh, they've stolen our animals, look at what they're doing to us and we're suffering already from everything. So I could imagine that kind of narrative much more than people feeling that we have freed the pigs or the chickens.
Actually, if I may butt in again, I think it really depends on the storytelling and on how you present yourself. Like the Italians, basically, they really appealed to the public, tried to not appear too aggressive. And actually, so Brigitte Gauthier from L214 was reminding me that VGT, it's an Austrian organization, they did a lot of open rescues. And actually, at some point, a judge ruled that even though they broke the law, they were justified because they went in the same way as the Constitution, because they constitutionalized animal protection, and so the Constitution was above the law, and so yeah. So in some cases it can work, but I think it really depends on the storytelling, basically. Did you want to add something?
Maybe, yeah, I can add. It depends also on like the goal that you want to achieve. A few weeks ago, some investigation was released on a pork farm in Switzerland, and the investigation was, or like the farmer was the president of Swissport, so of the pork association, which was it was in the news, and it was like it shocked everyone. I mean, not really shocked. It makes sense, but it was a great usage of like. Also showing what are the people that are behind it, and that those are the same people that are like defending very conservative laws in the parliament. But the other effect that it had, and that is where I am not sure where I stand sometimes, like on was it only good or not, is that it created a lot of solidarity within the farmers, because they were outraged that they broke the law, and also that they pointed out the president of Swissport. So I think it's great if some strategic organizations are doing it, and we are very glad at Sentience that other organizations are taking care of this. So we can then, say that use it for try to enter in dialogue, etc. So but it was very interesting to see like how it was then mediatized and what it. Where it led to also on the farmer side.
Well, I think we're going to close it here, because people will then have a bit of time to network and discuss around the buffet. Thanks a lot to all of you. And I hope that it gives you food for thought in terms of strategies on how to prioritize political action, on how maybe other forms of action can be complementary. And that's something that we will keep on discussing tomorrow. We're convinced at CAP that action at all levels is important and complementary, and maybe also tomorrow we can find ways to have cross-country campaigns as well, and building momentum in one country may help progressing in another country. Earlier I spoke about walls and Italy and France. Typically what happens in Italy can help in France and vice versa. So that's things that we can discuss tomorrow. I also want to thank Juliette, who is here, who is the... who is basically the engineer behind this event, and it was a monumental work that she did, so thank you. And tomorrow, for those who continue with us tomorrow, so it's 8:45 for breakfast here, for the workshops. Have a nice evening.